Hi there, and thank you for clicking on my video. Today we're going to be talking about building a Hildryn, especially because the Hildryn Prime access just came out. We're going to be doing a build from scratch. We're going to start with a new bro build that we're going to build up slightly, and then we're going to talk about a couple of higher tier builds for a more support-based frame, a support-based play style, and then one for more of a AoE heat dot build that's more strength but focused and is a roar build. Some of you might be familiar with it now, especially since we have the Archon mods. Hildryn, just to go over sort of like the broad view of Hildryn, is the easiest metaphor to think about is Hildryn is the shield version of an Arnos. She does lean more toward support due to her 3, and though you can stack a ton of strength on her to get a instant full strip, we will not be exploring that type of build. That's more left for like memes, you know, like just having a little bit of fun. But she's a very powerful frame. She has some trouble with higher end content, but we'll discuss as we're going through and modding and talking about how our stuff interacts, how to deal with that, especially in combination with the Shade Prime, which came out with Hildryn's Prime access. Because there's a very specific reason why the Shade was the one that got added to her, or joined her with her Prime access. So let's go over her abilities real quick. Nice and loose. Bailfire, Exalted Pistol, 50 shield to cast, 100 to 450 at base, efficiency, 100 is a quick cast, 450 is fully charged. Fully charged doubles the damage for 4.5 times the cost. Just it is what it is. And an explosion radius of 3, which does scale off of range. So everything but duration will enhance this. Efficiency will reduce the cost of casting, reduce the cost of the shot. Range will increase the explosion radius. Strength increases the damage. Pillage, you cast this ability. It's an AoE that has an initial cast radius, and then it travels out over a duration for a period of time, and it drains not health, shields and armor from enemies around you. This also, based on this, it also makes it practically useless against infested. So just in terms of like where to use Hildryn, she is very, very strong against Corpus. She does all right against Grenier. She has a lot of trouble against infested because they don't have, well, not many of them have armor, but a lot of them don't have armor. Obviously, this excludes the Deimos infested. With this, efficiency reduces the cost of the initial cast. Range does increase the initial cast radius. Duration increases how long the wave will expand out, time-wise. And strength increases the percent that you remove from the enemy, the amount of shields, the amount of armor. So at 400% strength, without corrosive projection, you will completely strip the defenses of the enemy in an AoE, which is pretty nice. Haven is her 3. This is her support ability. Can be used for a little bit of offense. Creates a shield aura around allies. Enemies that approach shielded allies will take damage. This has a very slight dot that does not get too strong. It's 200 at base strength. It's 200 radiation damage. So it'll do slightly more against alloy, I guess. The initial cast is 250. Drain per ally is 5. Drain per enemy is 25. The drain per enemy is the dot that gets applied. it deals damage in a dot-like fashion. It does not apply a radiation dot to the enemy. So if you're within range of the enemy, it will begin dealing damage. If you're not, there's no dot that stays on it because it's not a status effect. This also does a couple of other things. So we have the drain per energy at 25. The radius is 15 at base. Shield capacity that it grants to the allies, as well as your sentinel, is 500. Shield recharge increase is 80%. And obviously the dot. Okay, so let's go over what each of these are. The drain is the initial cast. Drain per ally is to give them the shield recharge buff and to increase their shield capacity. Drain per enemy is the radiation dot. And so let's talk about the shield capacity real quick before we get into modding and the final ability. When you're modding Hildryn, I need you to understand one thing, is that this ability, like a lot of abilities in Warframe, this ability can be used to grief. Okay? If you have people that are very experienced and are experienced with shield gating, you have to know, and they would know, but they're not going to know whether you're running a strength Hildryn or a like a negative strength Hildryn. They're not going to know which one you're running. If you are running a strength Hildryn and you are playing support, you need to know that you are your team's shield gate. So in order to use this as a strength Hildryn, as a support, you need to be constantly casting pillage. I can't emphasize that enough, because if your team is running like a bunch of min-maxed frames on like a level cap or like a longer run, it's going to matter more like an hour in. Your shield tends to hold up pretty well. But say like a volatile Eximus where it has those that series of mines that come out the front where it just does a ton of damage. You can screw up your teammates if you're running too much shield capacity, or if they're not running enough auger mods or briefer spikes. Because if they only go into overshields by like 2, and you all of a sudden give them 500 shields, they don't have Overguard shield gate anymore. So just keep that in mind. But you are going to be able to help them out in other ways, but just keep that in mind. There is a build for a min strength shield gate build where you're giving people lots of shields. So let's go over the scalings on these. Drain is affected by efficiency, the 250 at the top. Drain per ally is efficiency and duration. Drain per enemy is efficiency and duration. Radius is range. Obviously, shield capacity is strength. Shield recharge, and this is the only odd one, is duration. Damage per second is obviously strength, right? Okay, let's go to the fourth ability. Yeah, I can't give enough of an asterisk on Haven. If you're running around at low levels, like with new bros and whatnot, they're immortal. If you're trying to do a longer run, you really need to be cognizant of this because there is a small double-edged sword on Haven. All right, Aegis Storm. Frankly, since the Eximus Overguard changes, this has lost a lot of its effectiveness. There was even a brief period where this was a very meta ability. For those of you that did Orphix Venom, the event, the endgame event, you will probably remember a period of time where a range Aegis Storm Hildryn was meta. But since Overguard and enemies that are have Overguard up are not affected by abilities, this has lost a lot of its effectiveness. What this ability does is, in an AoE, it will pick up enemies and will cause them every second or two to drop energy orbs. And how you used to do this, because it's only relevant in Orphix Venom, is you would near the dropship, the sentient dropship, jump out into your operator, jump into your mech, but you would use Hildryn on an efficiency range build to clog up the entrance. It would lift up all the enemies and would cause them to drop energy orbs. And it would last just long enough if you were quick enough at the dropship. So her shield would last. And you would deal with the dropship, and then you would run back to where your Hildryn was and pick up all the energy orbs so you had like permanent energy. Sorry, I had to get a drink. Okay, so let's talk about this. Causes Hildryn to jump up in the air, picks up enemies. She has access to Haven and Bailfire, not Pillage. Nearby enemies are blasted into the air, where they will create an energy orb every few seconds. When shields run out, the enemies are smashed into the ground. So you have the initial cast of 100, drain per second is 25, drain per enemy is 25 as well. Radius is 15, which is kind of nice. Damage per second is radiation of 200. And the slam damage is 500. I'm not going to lie, unless it's like super low level, you're not really going to be killing too much with this. If you do, it's going to be like a lucky last hit, right? So the big thing about this is the energy orbs. At most, you can use this for like a weak form of CC nowadays on, say, like a defense mission where it will stop the non-Eximus enemies while Hildryn is in the air from entering like a defense area, like an area where you're defending something. So say like an arbitration or like a mobile defense or like a like an actual defense. So there's options for this where it still has some niche usefulness, but for most things, a Aegis Storm is still kind of the Helminth spot, right? Though to be honest, I've been Helminthing personally over Aegis, Bailfire, not Aegis Storm. Reason being is Bailfire only works if you have shields. Well, at higher levels, even if you have like 10,000 shields, you're going to lose your shields in one hit, which means you don't have Bailfire anymore. But Aegis Storm on a support Hildryn is still kind of nice, but if you're running damage or whatnot, it's to taste. As long as you don't Helminth over Pillage or Haven, you're fine. So, and her passive, which is pretty nice, I'm pretty sure this is the first instance of shield gating in the game, but she has a 3-second shield gate. It's like Protea. And of note, also, Haven gives your team the 3-second shield gate also, which is nice. So as long as you have shields up, your team has 3-second shield gate. But I honestly don't know if it would be equivocal to the fact that their shield gating doesn't work like they're used to anymore, because they're not. They're basing their survival around getting overguards to get the 1.3 second shield gate. They're not gonna have it anymore. So it is what it is, but that's what it is. So let's talk about modding. We're going to do a very generic mod. We're going to shoot some stuff and we're going to see what we like. So all of these abilities deal with range. So we're just going to go ahead and slap that on. She's shield based, so we're going to do shields. We're going to do a little bit of strength, just a generic intensity. We're going to do a little bit of duration and efficiency, just to make everything feel good. Everything's green. Health we're not going to worry about right now, but one of the things aura-wise that we're going to do is we're actually going to put, to help out Pillage a little bit, we're going to do Corrosive Projection. And one of the things I would say be careful of with this is that it is something that's going to matter later. So it will be effective now in terms of like min-maxing. is if you notice with just an Intensify, Pillage has a drain of 32%, right? So with 3 casts, you wouldn't 100% strip everything. It'd be just under. Because we have Corrosive Projection on, 3 casts will now 100% strip. And if you're not really comfortable with using Corrosive Projection, or say you want options and flexibility, you could do Growing Power here also to give yourself the toggle back and forth. It is pretty conditional, and with modern meta builds, you're going to be dealing tons of status effects anyway. But if you want, you could probably swing this, and obviously your team would like the extra strength, right? But for now, let's do Corrosive Projection. Which has disappeared. Alright. There really isn't too much more of a better slot than Prime Sure-Footed in the top right, but this is a log and reward. So you do have a couple of options. Not great ones, but it's a lot of utility. If you decide to unlock this, it is fantastic that it's polarized Vazarin. And the best mod for this is Prime Sure-Footed. But if you don't have it, the other one is Aviator. Is another slot. But that being said, if you do not have the Exilis slot equipped here, or if you don't have the Exilis slot unlocked, I wouldn't say unlock it just to put Aviator, because it's going to cost you a Forma elsewhere in the build. So for now, if you have Prime Sure-Footed, unlock it and clearly drop it there. It's fantastic. But Aviator is a good option for a 4 build. You could do Agility Drift, or maybe Retribution, depending on how melee-centric you are. But I wouldn't say any of them are really worth farming up an Exilis adapter and dropping it in, just to be able to put it there. Prime Sure-Footed is clearly worth it, and it's great that it's formed correctly also. Alright, so let's go back to our other ones. I have formed on a augment slot, or an augment polarity, the, was it Zenuric? Yeah. And I use Pillage, and to be honest, in terms of augments, it's kind of the default, because even if the enemy doesn't have health and shield, if you read the augment, enemies affected by Haven will be set ablaze for 200 heat damage and restore 50 additional shields to Hildryn. The important thing with this is it counteracts the full strip a tiny bit of Pillage if you overcast, especially at higher power strengths. It allows you to still get some shields back. It's obviously not as effective as the enemies with like full shields and armor, but this at least gives you a slight oh shit button at an absolute minimum. So I run it all the time, and I can't recommend it enough. And plus the heat damage, the additional CC is just fantastic. Okay, these final 2 mods. There's a little bit of flexibility here, but adaptation for lower level missions is absolutely fantastic. We got a big, beefy shield here to gain lots of adaptation stacks from. If you're maybe working on Forma or whatever, or you don't want to swipe for it, because her shields are so big, it's going to bite you in the ass a little bit with Steel Path. But for lower levels, this is perfectly fine. You can run an unranked adaptation here in lower levels. Maybe up to like the Zeraman, and say the Lewis Survival. I would say you would really want the regular adaptation here to be able to keep everything up. Which brings us to the final one. We have one more slot, and it really is sort of a flex slot. You can run more strength here, but due to the Arcanes... Actually, let's do Arcanes. The correct answer for the Arcane is the Aegis. On shield damage, 3% chance for 30% real shield recharge for 12 seconds. But I find this to be one of the Arcanes that's hard to recommend because it's an Eidolon one. If it was farmable, I mean, technically it is. But if it's farmable, in terms of like a store, I would feel better recommending it. So let's go out of the Arcanes that are actually farmable. So we have Molt Efficiency is good. Not Reconstruct. I would say Molt Augmented is probably the easiest to slot, just because it bumps your strength up so much. Brings you to 190 at full stacks, which is obviously fantastic. Takes the casting down to 2 casts to fully strip. But the final one, I know it's sort of beaten to a dead horse, but probably either Blessing or even Double Back if you're willing to like tumble around. But Blessing is just so easy to proc and to get your health up. It makes it that much safer. In terms of it's a farmable Arcane, this is a really good tanky Hildryn. So the only thing that is hard to get here would be Prime Sure-Footed. And this would be something with say, continuity or adaptation. Adaptation is an RNG drop, and Prime Continuity, you have to wait for Barrow. And this is a login, so it's still a pretty easy build to pick up. Obviously, if you don't have them, in this instance, especially if you're running Streamline, there is actually an argument for continuity being a really good mod in this circumstance, because with Pillage, it will keep the duration because of Hildryn's passive, the 3-second shield gate. The duration on the shield going out and then coming back will be faster than 3 seconds. So if you're jumping into a group of enemies and as you're going through the air, you cast 2, you land on the ground and instantly get 1 shot. Without having to quick cast or hit any other buttons, the shield will return fast enough to max your shields again and to trigger the passive again. So it's a nice-o ship button. But if you do Prime Continuity, if you notice, it's 3.1, which means you're not going to have shield gate. The second shield gate ready. So we're in a later thing we're going to talk about it, Transient Fortitude, and if you notice, the shield gate's back down and Prime Continuity is working. But that's another RNG mod. So in terms of like a generic build, Prime Continuity is fine. If you have Prime Sure-Footed, it goes here. Adaptation is a really good option if you plan on doing higher level content. Obviously, you would roll over to Rolling Guard. Because adaptation, your shield's going to get 1 shot anyway. So, talking about this, the only other thing I would say would be a good option is probably Natural Talent. Obviously, before talking about shards. This can help out a lot. Equilibrium, as cheesy as it is, definitely has a place if you're dealing with Infested. And even just like a generic Rush. But to be honest, you would just bullet jump. But if you have Rush and you don't have, say, Natural Talent, it's definitely an option. You could even do like Vigorous Swap. Would also be another option. But Natural Talent would probably be one of the better in-slot mods here. So, or even if you're super new to the game but you manage to farm this up, just throw some health on and you'll be fine. So let's see how far this gets us. Let me get an actual weapon. Yeah, right. So we have no strength. It's like 130. So let's test what our strip is. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so easy enough with corrosive projection and intensify. Three casts of our 2 is a full strip. And you can see we're dealing the 520 from our 3, which is radiation damage. When our 3 is up and active, when we hit stuff with our 2, sets them on fire. That's the augment coming in. You can recast this to build it up. Does a little bit of dot damage. There's ways to abuse this. Then if you cast 4, brings them up. You're dealing the damage from the 4 and the damage from the 3 at the same time. Shift to go up. Use your 1. And it does a bit of damage as well. It's also mostly base damage. So, okay. So this is our more basic build. Nothing fancy. We're not doing Archon mods. Let's talk about scaling it a little more. We're going to swap out Blessing for Aegis. We're going to keep Corrosive Projection. We're going to add Prime Continuity over Continuity. And we're going to go back to Transient Fortitude. And we come to like a sort of a inflection point a little bit. Corrosive Projection is fine here. But the fact is we don't need it anymore. So one of the things I've gotten in the habit of doing is I have a ton of Transient Fortitudes available. And I've modded a 40% strength minus 20% ability duration Transient Fortitude. So I have the option at max stacks of not needing Corrosive Projection to full strip. Because multi-augmented will bump me all the way up to 200%. And that means I won't be reliant on Corrosive Projection. So it is an option. And with Transient Fortitude, it does keep the duration below 3 seconds. And it is slightly longer than regular continuity. So it is a net plus by like, what, 5%? Yeah, 5%. So I like doing this if I'm going to be swapping out the aura. So it's up to you. It's an option. You can run a support build or if you want at this point. But this will free up your aura mod so you're not stuck with Corrosive Projection. So if you want to run, as long as it's not power donation, say like a Steel Charge, Rejuvenation, Rifle Scavenger would definitely be useful. You could even run Pistol Amp, though probably not ideal. But if you're going against, say like Infested, the sortie yesterday was an Infested mobile defense. So Infested Impedance went right in here. But this can free up your aura mod a bit if you want. Or if you're doing like a different build. But for me, I end up running Mecha Empowered at a later one. I'll show you later. But this is where you start getting into like more specific stuff. For Steel Path, I would say swap over to Rolling Guard if you're doing regular Star Chart adaptation. Beginning is Steel Path. Adaptation still pays dividends. I think, what is it, 300 to 400 adaptation just starts to become like pretty useless. And you'd rather have the iframes. But in terms of like quote-unquote min-maxing, what we start needing is we start worrying about what the actual stats are for some of this stuff. and how fast it casts. So right here, we're going to cast our 1. And we are at 3753. And we go down to 34, what was that, 3438? All right, good enough. 1, 2. Gets us beyond the tile. And the 4 gets almost an entire, like half a tile. This wouldn't be enough to guarantee a full tile. And this one doesn't have an indicator. So, okay. So personally, what I like to do is I like to prioritize range on Hildryn. There's an argument for not. If you're just doing a pillage build, but if you want to use your Haven at all, I would suggest going double range. Do not use overextended unless you're doing like a shield gate support build. Because you can really increase how fast the recharge is, like to absurd numbers. But then you have to dump stat strength, and we'll discuss that in a bit. And this tends to be a fairly well-rounded build. You could even swap out Streamline, and I do that a lot. Like, I generally don't run Streamline on Hildryn. And she can even survive pretty well with negative duration and negative efficiency. She doesn't have any problem with that, as long as it's not like 13% duration. But like a little bit, say you want to run like a Blind Rage to get the strength even higher. But personally, with Natural Talent, if you do not have the Archon shards to get the casting speed on, Natural Talent is a really good option here. But as soon as you get the Archon shards back, Streamline is another really good option to keep those casts super cheap. And the range was 26 and a quarter, and that is significantly nicer. Let's see if we can get to half the tile. Yeah, it's about half. But one of the reasons is, if you see, it completely clears the tile. And that's the armor and the shield removal is going that far, which is really nice. But there's also another reason to go double range. So 175 range, 140 strength. Though we don't need it, we'll still take corrosive projection just because it's a really solid aura to have. But in terms of like optimal min-max, if you're surviving on like double casting your 2 and you want to strip with that, if you want to do that gameplay, you can remove this for something else. And personally, I did. I'm running the mecha set on Hildryn, but this would be an option. So, okay. So, let's go over to the reason why we want double range. The Bailfire Charger. The base range... Sorry, it's not going to show it here. The range... The base radius, the explosion radius of the Bailfire, this is pure AoE, is affected by the range on Hildryn. So if you see, we went to 175. The explosion radius is 5 1/4, which is okay. And if you run primed fulmination, it scales off the 5 1/4. So if you run 280 range, fulmination scales off of that number, the strength boosted one. So if you want to do a raw damage Bailfire Charger build, the name of the game is raw damage. You would run, on Hildryn, you would run a ton of strength, a ton of range. You could even run like Blind Rage Transient Fortitude and just not compensate for it, and jack this number up as high as you want. You can get some pretty absurd numbers out of this. But it ends up not scaling that well basically only for like meme videos, but it's a good time. Um, so if you want to deal with enemies like that, more power to you. The gas build, gas electric, does do quite a bit of damage if the enemies are full stripped. But the issue is let's look at an unwanted one. Here we go. It's 5% crit chance, a 1.5x crit multiplier, and 10% status chance. It is just best to go absolutely pure base damage. So Hornet Strike, Prime Fulmination, Lethal Torrent, Galvanized Diffusion. And you can pick whatever you want the other mods to be. Even though it's 5%, sometimes I still run the crit chance because it's rolled on each instance of damage, so you'll hit something. But if you want to do like huge damage, you could do like Magnum Force, Anemic Agility, Pathogen Rounds, and I think I was modded for Corrosive, or sorry, Viral. For a big raw damage hit. It gets up pretty spicy to 22,000. But you could also do like a faction damage also, if you want to mess around with it, and it goes here on Magnum Force. Yeah, nothing else works on this in terms of like crit, in terms of like working really well. Though I guess you could go like a Combat Avenger build, and that would do pretty decent, but it'd be really hard to guarantee the, like, say, getting oranges, and even then it wouldn't help your crit multiplier. So I would say honestly just skip it. Just go raw damage, use your 2 to strip the enemy. Almost everything at that point is weak to electricity, and it'd probably be the best way to mod for that with a Combat Avenger build and like a full strip, right? Okay, we got our 1 up. Let's full strip. And because I have Overguard active, alright, about 46k. $56k. It'll increase a bit because of the multi-shot. Alright, there we go. Yeah, 46 with a 71k. It's enough to kill even most stuff in Steel Path. Not bosses, though. So in terms of usability, you want to try not to use the charge shot. Unless you just want to mess around with it. In which case, I'd highly recommend going like a max strength range build. Like Blind Rage, Transient Fortitude, do like Combat Avenger, the Combat Aura with the Avenger hold on, tip of my tongue. Arcane, the Avenger Arcane. This guy. You could even min-max it even more with like a Smita to get 200%. And really have some fun whenever the buff rolls around. And that would probably be the best way to utilize that, but the fact is that because it doesn't have the crit chance, crit damage, or the status chance to support additional scalings, it's kind of hard to do like a ton of effective damage against stuff that's armored. You can obviously do meme builds where you can get like 2-3 million, but if you're trying to seriously use it, at higher levels, you need something that you can survive with more. And in order to do like a ton of strength on this, um, you better be using Xeneric Protective Dash, in which case you wouldn't even run shields. You'd have Rolling Guard and as many iframes as possible to stay alive. It would probably be how you would have to do it. But you can do it like, and also with the Airburst helmet from Zephyr, and you'd need the augment for it. But that's how you would make that meme build. Because people want to use this, I get it. I wanted to use it too, but it's just, honestly, just use the faction, or the bonus damage to raw health that Viral gives you, and you should be sitting pretty. And if you want to do even more damage, say you're doing like a bit of a long run and you decide you want to use this, faction damage goes here. But this would be a more general build. But anyway. Okay, so let's talk about some variations. This is a more scaled build. Let's get rid of this. Let's build it back up. Redirection, we need that. Let's do the Roar build. Which is not what this was. Alright, so we have Roar, Helmuth on here. We'll just get rid of all of this. Roar is a build that is going to require range, strength, more importantly. So we're going to go Blind Rage, Transient Fortitude. One of the nice things about Hildryn is because her energy comes from her shields and they regen, and you can get them back so easily from pillage. Negative strength doesn't hammer her like what it would normally do to like another frame with like a small energy pool. So we would have a slightly short duration Roar, but it'd be 76%. We would have Molt Augmented. You could even go for like a more meme build with Growing Power for even more strength. And you would just go through and stack Blazing Pillage. And the meta for this build actually takes advantage of Archon Vitality for a relatively useless stat. Because I have the Forma for it, I always use the max rank one. But you don't even need this to be max rank. You can do it with an unranked one. But if you have the Forma for it, and it's already here because you get 2 Vazarim polarities. If you got it, just put it on. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to need is range, which is going to be stretch and reach. And the last one is more or less to personal preference. So it's kind of whatever you want. Since you're going to be casting so much, Natural Talent would be really good here. Let's go ahead and put Corrosive Projection on to get that strip going. You do have the option of here, instead of Natural Talent, to go ahead and put Continuity on. You could definitely slot that here also to bring that back up. Or just like a straight Streamline would also be really useful. Just to keep those costs down a little bit. But this is basically the essentials of the Roar build. You're going to be recasting Roar quite a bit. The rest of your duration-based abilities are going to do pretty good. The one that's mostly impacted. Now you remember before 2 went beyond the thing. So it's going to be smaller. And you just got to keep that in mind. But Roar, let's take a look at what it does. It's actually pretty spicy. So we're at 5,900, 7,800, 9,800, 11k, 13k. And the good thing about it is because you're casting with abilities, you can actually use this as like a support nuke frame. And this is personally part of the reason why I run the mecha set on this. Is just to build up a casual nuke as you're going through. And for the additional health tank and the additional scaling. And I'll show that to you. Food for thought. And obviously a pet. Was it this one? Yeah. Alright, so we can see the additional scaling. Now we're at 30k with a couple of casts. We didn't even get that before. With all the other casts, we just barely started getting up to those numbers. The AoE nuke's way faster. So if you're trying to do like a full support build, but still want to do like a little bit of damage. Alright, so there is our marked enemy. Yeah, we're already at 25k. Cast it again. 38k, 46k, 60k. Yeah, it just keeps climbing. It's a nice little nuke build, but yeah, your pet's gonna go down. Because you're focusing more on casting. But if you're willing to do it, it's a pretty niche little build. It feels pretty good. You can also do the Hurus, where it's got the stalk function. Same as Ghost on the Shade. This works out pretty well. This is just sort of a general build. Obviously, you're not going to need... Actually, this would be effective if you're running the mecha set. Normally you would just need shields, right? But because of the mecha set, Link Armor gets a bonus, and because we're running Archon Vitality, Health actually gets a bonus also. So this will get adjusted. It doesn't show it now, but this will get adjusted way more once the Mecha Synth mod gets its armor. So honestly, not too bad of a build. This has a tough time in Steel Path though. But if everything's on fire and everything, and you and the pet are invisible, I don't know, who cares, right? So this is what I've actually been running personally with this guy and Hildryn. But that would be a more roar based build. Obviously, strength to get the roar buff as high as possible. Vitality for the double dip, roar double dips on the heat dot. Mecha set gives you an additional faction damage. Multiplies your damage again by 2.5. The final heat dot. That's why the heat dot jumps so fast. And the full mecha set to give us that nice big AoE. And even with the small bit of health that we have, 740, it's going to be encompassed with a ton of armor. Like, I've seen this over like 2,000 armor. And I know I tout this set a lot, but it's pretty busted if you can get used to the playstyle. But this would be more of a roar-based build. And you saw how it was built up. Alright, let's go over to the support one. This one revolves around Voracious Metastasis. Almost got it. And basically how free of a cast this is. If you are in any way, shape, or form running a decent amount of strength, you can get some pretty nasty AoE health ticks. And combined with the shield regen from Haven, you can get some pretty tasty health regen. I don't think it beats out Nourish on Grendel, but between the shields, the armor strip, the shield removal, the health per second, the additional shield gate, and the shield recharge, and the AoE orb generation on enemies combined with the CC, this is a surprisingly potent build. So for your consideration, the aura mod can be whatever you want. Just take whatever's most useful. Corrosive projection, shield disruption against Corpus, obviously, and Prime sure-footed if you have it. If you don't even bother unlocking the slot on Hildryn. But this is an example of that. The build focuses around range first and foremost, to keep the Haven on as many people as possible. The one competing status, if you will, is duration on this. And I sort of stayed around 150, 130, because you actually increase, and I'll show that. All right, that's gone. Oh, hold on. Remove. When you cast Voracious Metastasis, because of the fact that this is using shields, adding strength increases the amount of health that you regen. So going from 100 to 199 almost doubles, right? But in terms of health per second, what the real answer is a little bit more complex than that. So this is no strength, is 50. Blind Rage is 99. That makes sense. And a Transient Fortitude gives 7 more health per second on its own with no other influencing factors than a Blind Rage, right? And because this is free to cast, you can just spam it. It costs you shields, and if you're running support and you have a shade and you're invisible, you're just spamming that all the time. So there's a little bit of context to it. So there's a competing issue with the duration, because duration increases Haven's shield recharge, but it hurts the health per second of Voracious Metastasis. But to be honest, if somebody needs more than 100 health a second, they're probably going to die anyway. Though to be honest, having a nice quick 1,000 health per second heal is really nice. You can do, let's see, duration. All right, so 13%. Let's do strength. And efficiency. Alright, so higher efficiency, we've dump statted duration, and we have 254 strength. And it's a 1016 heal in a second. So it's kind of playstyle based. The monster heal honestly is kind of nice. And you can balance it however you want. But to be honest, I kind of like having the monster 1000 health pop, because most people are running shield gate setups nowadays. And with the exception of some frame that is running, if you're running a blessing setup, okay, cast it twice. You know what I mean? So it's kind of up to whatever you're looking for. There is some nuance in this. If you want the quick pop, you just want to refresh everybody's health, But everybody's like really competent, right? Like everybody knows what they're doing, and maybe they don't have any of the arcanes from Little Duck. You can toggle this slightly to shorter duration. You can mod for less duration a little bit if the people that you're playing with are more comfortable, to get a way quicker pop on the heal. And you would just have to compensate a little bit on the duration. So like fleeting expertise tends to be the compromise. You would look for something like this, like a 73-75, and you can see that the total health is 1270. But now I'm only healing 170 health a second. So it tends to be a solid compromise, to either go like to stay between like 150 and 70. I like about 120 because it really helps out the duration on Haven. So it's all based on your likes, right? Play around with it. I like this Forma setup. The D polarity is innate. These two D polarities are innate. I did this, the dash, the V, and the aura forma, and it tends to be a really flexible. You don't want to do like where everything's formed except for the last one. You want to leave some flexibility for Hildryn unless you plan on building several of them. Like if you really, really like the Bailfire build and you want a meme build, forma the hell out of a Hildryn on their own. You could legitimately make a separate Hildryn for each of these builds. Like if you really want the Bailfire to do a ton of damage, and you're willing to do Combat Discipline Avenger, and run like an Adarza, and like you really want to cut loose and have some fun, and like you're playing on a team with like a Harrow, where everybody's got shields, all the shields in the world. You could definitely do that. And one of the things I would say to sort of maybe lean into that a little bit more, because the drain on Bailfire gets frankly oppressive, is Harrow's Condemn on the 4 could definitely help. Because when you throw it, make sure you got a bit of range to it. You only need like 145 at most. I think that gets you up to like, 29 or 30 meters of range. Just cast that, and it'll keep your shields nice and topped off. If you really want to do the Bailfire build, because that's the biggest problem. One is it's a lot for the average person to deal with, and then if you have somebody who say like being a dick and running like a negative power strength Equinox or something like that, like it can really mess with you, with the power strength difference, because negative strength Equinox obviously multiplies the enemy damage, because of course that's in the game. But now that I've completely messed up my builds, but Arcane Aegis Augmented is, to be honest, probably best in slot for Hildryn. It's hard to argue against these two. A couple of the new Arcanes, like say if you don't have Aegis, Blessing, obviously, because it's just a generic safe build, or safe Arcane. Though to be honest, what is it, double back? If you're willing to flail around like that all the time, technically this is better effective hit points. And reason being is the plus 200% health counts as modded damage. So it's additive to vitality. Right? So when you add this, it only goes up, what, the 440? It's because the base health is 100. This is plus 440% of 100, right? So 440. But this is only 200, so it's 200 plus 440 to give 640, and then that scales off of 100. So because you have modded damage up here, technically double back in terms of mod space does scale better. But you gotta flail. But Aegis augmented are the go-to. So pretty basic. Let's do our generic build, just to leave it on the final thing. If anybody actually made it this far. Again, we're 50 minutes into a video, and I'll try to wrap it up. Alright, so pretty generic build. This will work for pretty much everything. You got a flex slot. If you're looking for something just a little bit safer, or you want the double up, you got plenty of capacity to throw Archon Vitality here. It's what I'm running a lot when I'm running the mecha set. It's pretty basic. Adjust as necessary with the mods. But strength, range, a bit of duration, and a ton of shield is what Hildryn needs. If you don't have Archon Vitality, Natural Talent, if you have shards, obviously who cares about Natural Talent, and then just mod whatever you want. To be honest, if you have a yellow shard, you probably don't need this. And then you could throw something in like Energy Conversion, because you're going to have tons of energy orbs. Because you're not going to be casting anything. And that'll help out with the strip on pillage. Get that number nice and high. Get an early 2 strip. And then eventually it's just a permanent 2 strip. So it's a good flex slot. I've seen people do Archon Intensify. Personally, it doesn't make sense to me. If you, or not Archon Intensify, Umbral Intensify, because Hildryn doesn't cast that much, except for her 2, and the 3 snapshots. Once you pick up an energy orb and you see it, just recast your 3, and then provided you're killing stuff every time you recast almost for lower levels, you're going to have an enhanced pillage. Obviously, this might be an issue at higher levels. But then you can drop in like a Blind Rage or like a Rolling Guard. Probably want Rolling Guard, though, for this setup. So something like this to get those numbers up. If you want to go, and this is the final thing on it, if you want to go for the one-shot strip, which is very, very niche nowadays, or it's very meta, not niche. All you have to do to figure out what you need is, because there's 25% scaling on strip, you just multiply, because at 400 you have 100% strip. If you're using corrosive projection, which I highly recommend you do, minus 18 times 4. Whoops, okay. So 18 times 4 minus 400. Okay, so the golden number you need to get to is 328. We have 254. Sorry, 328 minus 254. Which means we need 74. Okay. Now, there's 2 ways to do this. You can either get rid of reach, and we need 74, and let's just go for the full thing. And augmented is another 60. So the issue is we need 14. You can either rely on Matter Eye, Sorry, Zenuric. Wellspring. Yeah, Wellspring. And just make sure to cast it the entire time. Definitely an option. You could also run a kit gun. Let's see, what do we got? Spore laser, where are you? And you would need... Pax Bolt. It would give you a little bit of strength, a little bit of efficiency, which would definitely help on this sort of build. But if you don't want to bother with any of that, and I understand, if you're trying to run the one strip, the single cast strip build, Augur Reach has got to go. Because if you think about it, redirection is shield capacity. You need that. All of your abilities cost shields. You need a bigger... This is your energy pool. This might as well just say flow, right? Rolling Guard for surviving at higher level content. Blazing Pillage, I guess could also technically be one of the flex slots. If you're just trying to full strip, because you're going to be casting Pillage anyway. And you're not going to care about the additional shields if you can one-shot them right after. But I run Pillage personally on pretty much everything. All of the builds, because it's so nice to have that little extra CC. So, I would recommend Augur Secrets, either over Augur Reach, or over Blazing Pillage, for something like this. If you really, really, really want to go for that one-shot strip build, and you're going to have to just sort of deal with the fact that Haven isn't going to cause any heat dots for CC. But if you can full strip and you can one-shot that group of enemies, who cares about CC anyway? Like, say you got like a viral Tonkor or like a viral Brahma or something. You strip them, they're dead, right? So who cares about CC at that point? But this would be an option, but you need the strength in order to get over the bar. The 14, it'll be 10 over. So for the full strip, this would also be the other option. But anyway, this video has gone on way too long. But thank you for listening to my TED Talk. That's what the joke is. But I hope this was helpful. It's just sort of talking about the frame, how to maximize each thing. I hope this is helpful, just listening to somebody talk about it. But if you have any questions, comments, concerns, just leave them in the comment section and I'll get back to them. Alright, y'all. Have a blessed day. Take it easy. Stay excellent.